Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
An Israeli man in his 20s was critically injured in a truck ramming attack. A gas tanker rammed into a bus stop at the Givat Asaf junction near the community of Bet El. The terrorist driver was arrested by security forces, and troops set up extra roadblocks in the area. Meanwhile, IDF counterterrorism operations are continuing in northern Samaria. An Air Force strike targeted a terror cell during an operation in Tubas. According to Palestinian sources, 5 terrorists were killed in the strike. The anti-terror operation in Tubas and the surrounding areas has been ongoing for the past several days. The deadly murder of 3 Israelis at the Allenby Bridge brought attention to the challenge of Iranian organized arms smuggling from Jordan to terrorists in Judea and Samaria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The deadly terror attack at the Allenby Bridge that murdered 3 Israeli civilian workers has focused attention on the growing terror threat along the expansive border between Israel and Jordan. Security measures on the bridge are part of the IDF effort to prevent weapons smuggling since October 7th. 3 Israeli civilian workers were murdered in the attack when a lone Jordanian terrorist with a smuggled handgun arrived at the crossing in a truck and opened fire at the Israeli workers at the bridge.
זה יום קשה. מחבל נתעב רצח בדם קר 3 מאזרחינו בגשר אלנבי. אני שולח בשם הממשלה ובשמי תנחומים למשפחות הנרצחים.
Prior to October 7th, there were already a wave of emerging terror attacks in Judea and Samaria. This was fueled by smuggled weapons, primarily rifles, that were getting into the hands of terrorists in Jenin and other areas in northern Samaria. Over the last 2 years, smuggling from Jordan has increased greatly and includes weapons and materials used in explosives. Iran is behind some of the activities designed to destabilize the Kingdom of Jordan and use it to move weapons and threats closer to Israel.
אנחנו מוקפים באידיאולוגיה רצחנית שמובלת על ידי ציר הרשע של איראן. בימים האחרונים מחבלים נתעבים רצחו 6 מחטופינו בדם קר ו3 משוטרי משטרת ישראל. הרוצחים אינם מבחינים בינינו. הם רוצים לרצוח את כולנו. עד האחרון שבינינו. ימין ושמאל, חילונים ודתיים, יהודים ולא יהודים. מה שמונע את השמדת עמנו כבימים עברו הוא עוצמתה של מדינת ישראל וכוחו של צבא ההגנה לישראל.
And joining us now with more on the security situation on Israel's northern border is Brigadier General in the Reserves Amir Avivi, founder and CEO of the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Amir, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So the IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi and the head of U.S. Central Command met on the northern border for consultations. On top of that, we're hearing stronger rhetoric from Israel's political leaders that the IDF will soon shift its focus to Hezbollah. I mean, what is your assessment of these moves and these statements?
So we have to remember that on the 7th of October, 10 months ago, Israel decided to be on the offensive in Gaza and on the defense on all other fronts. We needed to focus on Gaza because, among other things, because of lack of munitions, divisions that were closed throughout the years, and less forces. After 10 months, we reached a point that for the first time we can change the strategy and move the center of gravity from the south to the north. It doesn't mean that in Gaza we will not continue to be on the offensive, but it does mean that we achieved the level of readiness, and the achievements in Gaza enable us to really shift the center of attention to the north and go into a full-scale war in the north in order to create the terms for returning our 60,000 displaced citizens back safely home.
So that's what you think is going to happen in the very near future? We're going to full-out war with Lebanon, with Hezbollah?
I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm sure it needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And this is the right timing to do it. I don't think we can wait anymore. I think it's time to be proactive on the north. And we have to take in account, if we won't be proactive, then our enemies will be proactive. And we cannot afford another 7th of October. Mm-hmm. We cannot afford being surprised again. We have to take in account that our enemies are also planning plans and might surprise us. We need to be proactive. We need to attack. And I think there is an understanding, both on the political level and the military, that in order to be able to bring back safely our citizens to the north, we need to push Hezbollah out of South Lebanon. I don't see any realistic scenario where this will happen diplomatically. I think there is no international pressure that is really dealing with threatening Hezbollah or Iran in order to push Hezbollah out of South Lebanon, and therefore the only real option we have is war.
Mm-hmm. And I want to also ask about Gaza, because, you know, the implication in these statements is that the war is winding down in the Strip, or will wind down in the Strip. I mean, is this your understanding? Will Israel need to first end the war in Gaza in order to deal with the northern front? Or is it capable of engaging both Hezbollah and continuing the war against Hamas?
The war against Hamas will continue for years. I mean, in Operation Defensive Shield, it took us a month and a half to regain control of the cities in Judah and Samaria and the West Bank, but it took us 5 years to stabilize the situation. Dealing with Hamas will take time. And yes, we can continue dealing with Hamas with less forces. It will take more time. And shift most of our units north and deal with Hezbollah, a war that will probably be much, much more intensive, but I think also shorter, because both sides, eventually, the prices will be such that both sides will want to end this pretty fast.
And I mean, you've said, how can Israel dismantle Hamas but keep Hezbollah on its northern border, even if it's pushed back past the Litani? I mean, will we see the north potentially becoming what Gaza has been the past 20 years? I mean, won't Israel at some point have truly no choice but to enter Lebanon, to dismantle Hezbollah just as it's doing now in Gaza with Hamas?
So I think we will definitely need a ground incursion in South Lebanon. We'll have to dismantle all the infrastructure Hezbollah has built in South Lebanon. We'll probably have to stay there for a very long time. I don't see any solution at the moment, at present, that will enable us to go out and keep this area as a buffer zone without Hezbollah going back and building the infrastructure again. And we cannot put the citizens of the north in the same danger that the citizens of the south have experienced prior and on the 7th of October. So I think that one of the terms needed to bring back our citizens north is that when they arrive to their towns and cities, when they look north, they need to see the IDF, certainly not Hezbollah. But this will not be enough. We have to hit all Hezbollah capabilities. We cannot eradicate Hezbollah the way we want to eradicate Hamas. Lebanon is much bigger. Hezbollah can withdraw all the way to Beirut and beyond. They can even withdraw into Syria. So I don't think that eradicating Hezbollah is an achievable goal, but definitely hitting them hard, setting them back many years, this is something achievable.
Hitting them hard and restoring deterrence. Amir Avivi, thank you so much for your analysis today.
My pleasure.
In Israel, the fight against Hamas terror continues. In Gaza, 2 IDF soldiers were killed and several others wounded in an accident when an IDF helicopter crashed in a landing zone in Gaza. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas as a military formation in Gaza is gone. Gallant said the IDF focus is shifting north to fully confront Hezbollah in Lebanon. Gallant told troops on the northern front that they should prepare for the ground offensive to push Hezbollah away from the Israeli border.
More words of war in the north. Speaking to the foreign press, Defense Minister Gallant said the IDF focus is shifting northward to fully confront Hezbollah in Lebanon. Gallant told troops on the northern front that they should prepare for the ground offensive to push Hezbollah away from the Israeli border.
מרכז הכובד עובר צפונה. אנחנו לקראת השלמת המשימות שלנו בדרום, אבל יש לנו כאן משימה שהיא משימה שלא בוצעה. המשימה הזאת זה לשנות את המצב הביטחוני ולהחזיר את התושבים אל הבתים שלהם. אני את ההנחיות האלה שהיום אתם מחכים להם נתתי בדרום וראיתי את הכוחות פועלים. אחרי 3 שבועות יצאו לדרך, ביצעו את המשימה שלהם. זה יגיע גם כאן. ואתם צריכים להיות ערוכים ומוכנים לבצע את המשימה הזאת.
Gallant said that while Hamas is defeated as a military formation, Hamas is still engaged in guerrilla warfare, and the army is still fighting Hamas terrorists and pursuing Hamas leadership. According to Gallant, the IDF could withdraw from Philadelphia corridor for 6 weeks in a deal to free hostages without endangering security. As Gallant was speaking, Hezbollah was firing rockets into the Galilee. Some 30 launches were detected. Some of them were intercepted. There were no casualties. Within minutes, an aircraft attacked the launchers at Al-Tiri and Al-Mansuri areas from which the launches were made toward the Sasa area in western Galilee. Earlier, the IDF attacked and eliminated Mohammed Qasem al-Shir in the Kiron region. He served as the commander of the Radwan unit of the Hezbollah terror group. It's day 341 of the war in Gaza. 2 soldiers were killed and several wounded when an Israeli Air Force helicopter crashed in the southern Gaza Strip last night in an apparent accident. According to an initial probe, a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter flew to Rafah with a medical team to evacuate a seriously wounded combat engineer during fighting in the area. During the final landing stage inside an IDF encampment in Rafah, the helicopter hit the ground instead of touching down correctly. According to the probe, the helicopter was not hit by enemy fire, and the crash occurred moments before the aircraft was due to land.
Israeli airstrikes reportedly targeted multiple areas and targets in central Syria, killing at least 14 people and wounding many more. According to Syrian media, waves of airstrikes struck in the province of Hama, causing damage to a precision rocket manufacturing plant. Meanwhile, a Hezbollah UAV soared a direct hit on an Israeli apartment building in Nahariya without causing injuries. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The overnight airstrikes targeted multiple areas and targets in central Syria, killing at least 14 and wounding dozens. According to Syrian state media, waves of airstrikes struck in the province of Hama, causing damage to infrastructure at military sites. The airstrikes deep in Syria were alleged to be carried out by Israel. The strikes hit multiple targets in the Meisaf area of Hama, used as a base for Iranian forces and pro-Iranian militias. One of the specific targets was said to be the Scientific Studies and Research Center used to produce precision surface-to-surface missiles. The IDF had no comment on the Syrian strikes. The alleged Israeli strike in Syria came amid intense cross-border tit-for-tat attacks with Hezbollah. The Lebanese terrorists shelled northern Israel, and the Air Force struck launchers and terror infrastructure in South Lebanon. Overnight, the Air Force hit targets in Kafar Kila, Taibe, Hanin, and Yurin. This morning, a Hezbollah UAV scored a direct hit on the 14th floor of an apartment building in the northern coastal city of Nahariya. No one was injured. Meeting troops on day 339 of the war in Gaza, Defense Minister Gallant said that the IDF weight of balance may soon shift to the north.
אנחנו בעזה צריכים להשיג את שתי המטרות שלנו, גם לחסל את החמאס וגם להחזיר את החטופים, ואנחנו על העניין הזה בכל הכוח. במקביל לנושא הזה, אנחנו מסתכלים על כל הזירה, וזה אומר שבזמן שאתם נלחמים כאן בעזה, אנחנו נערכים גם לכל דבר שיכול לקרות בצפון, והעברת מרכז כובד יכולה להיות מהירה ויכולה לכלול גם אתכם, בלוח זמנים קצר. ואנחנו ערוכים לכל האפשרויות האלה.
Gallant also indicated that the war effort in Gaza was not nearly complete.
כאן אנחנו נמשיך ונלחץ ונכה את חמאס ונשחוק אותה ונחסל את החמאס, וגם נגיע למוחמד סנואר וגם ליחיא סנואר. לכל האנשים האלה, המחבלים הארורים האלה, אנחנו נגיע. וכל מי שחושב אחרת, שיסתכל על מרואן עיסא ועל מוחמד דף, גם הם חשבו שהם חסינים, הם לא איתנו היום.
The forces of Division 162 continue to operate in the Rafah area. They've eliminated terrorists, raided terror infrastructure, and located many weapons in the area. Despite IDF efforts, Hamas managed to launch 2 rockets from Gaza toward Ashkelon in South Israel. One rocket was intercepted by air defense, and the other landed in the sea. An airstrike eliminated terrorist Raf Omer Salman Abu Shab, the commander of the rocket unit in the destroyed Khan Yunis brigade.
Northern Israel, including the city of Kiryat Shmone, was pounded by about 50 rockets fired by Hezbollah from South Lebanon this morning. IDF Chief Halevi was on the northern front checking troop readiness for war. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The incoming Hezbollah rockets this morning came in 3 salvos toward Kiryat Shmona and the Galilee Panhandle, causing damage to homes, but no injuries were reported. Most of the projectiles were shot down by air defense or fell harmlessly in open areas. It was a violent weekend of cross-border strikes between Israel and Hezbollah. After 30 incoming rockets were detected, warplanes attacked launchers and Hezbollah military structures in several areas in South Lebanon. IDF artillery struck the areas of Shoba and Kafar Haman and a munitions warehouse in Leda. IDF Chief of Staff Halevi visited the 210th Division in the Golan Heights, meeting Northern Commander Ori Gordon to renew potential war preparations at the border. Fighters from the Iftach Brigade practiced maneuvers for scenarios in enemy territory. The troops practiced combat and maneuver scenarios in complicated terrain, advancing along a mountainous route like those in Lebanon. It's day 338 of the war in Gaza. The Air Force targeted and killed key Islamic Jihad and Hamas commanders embedded in civilian areas. The airstrike was called in after intelligence indicated the presence of the commanders in the Amr ibn al-As school in northern Gaza. 2 jihad commanders were eliminated during the day of Air Force strikes at the school complex turned terror base. The strike by the aircraft was precise and ended an immediate threat to the area. Elsewhere in Gaza this week, IDF forces attacked and destroyed over 40 terror infrastructures, eliminated more than 100 terrorists, while located several tunnel shafts.
The IDF has released a harrowing video showing the tunnel in which the 6 Israeli hostages were murdered by their Hamas captors in recent days, with their bodies returned to Israel for burial. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari entered the tunnel and showed on video the horrific conditions the hostages were held under in a long and narrow tunnel where they could barely stand, the tunnel where they were eventually executed in last week on August 29th. The IDF spokesperson was lowered into the tunnel where the hostages were held and later murdered. An IDF graphic shows the intricate system of tunnels where the hostages were held.
The shaft goes down about 20 meters into the ground, using 4 separate ladders. There, it connects to a narrow tunnel with no rooms that is so low you can't stand up straight in it. The tunnel is about 120 meters long and ends in a blocked iron door. This short blocked part of the tunnel is where the hostages were held and murdered.
Terrorist ammunition was found inside the tunnel, along with bottles of urine and an improvised toilet pit. Proof was found showing women were present, with female sanitary products and clothing discovered. Hagari pointed out the blood-stained spot where the hostages were brutally murdered.
This is the blood of Hirsch, Eden, Carmel, Ori, Almog, and Alex. They were heroes, and they were here in this tunnel for weeks or days, we will find out. But they were here in this tunnel in horrific conditions, where there is no air to breathe, where you cannot stand. And they survived, but they were murdered by terrorists.
The IDF spokesman said it's not too late to bring some of the hostages home alive.
There's still hostages, 101. Some of them are alive in the same conditions in tunnels like this in Gaza. And we need to do everything we can in all the means we can to bring them back home alive.
In Tuesday night's heated presidential debate, Donald Trump claimed that Israel would cease to exist within 2 years if Kamala Harris is elected. Harris defended her support for Israel while calling for an immediate end to the war with Hamas. More on how Israel factored into the conversation from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
In the first presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, the former president made a bold claim, suggesting Israel would disappear within 2 years if Harris were elected.
She hates Israel. if she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one.
Trump highlighted his support for Israel and his foreign policy achievements during the debate. He reiterated his belief that the October 7 attack would not have occurred under his leadership, citing the sanctions he imposed on Iran, which is the key backer of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Trump also vowed that, if elected, he would quickly settle the ongoing war. In response, Harris defended Israel's right to fight Hamas, but, as in previous statements, called for an immediate end to the war due to the high number of Palestinian civilian casualties. During the debate in Philadelphia, moderators pressed Harris to clarify her stance that while Israel has the right to defend itself, it matters how the war is conducted. Harris placed the blame for the war squarely on Hamas, but reiterated President Joe Biden's ceasefire for hostage deal plan, a plan that has seen no progress in months and might now be off the table. Furthermore, Harris promoted a two-state solution, a proposal currently rejected by most Israelis and Palestinians. Israel has warned that such a solution could jeopardize its existence. Trump criticized Harris for not attending Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress over the summer, and he accused her of having bias against not only Jews, but also Arabs.
In her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that.
Over the weekend, an American-Turkish dual citizen was shot and killed by IDF troops during a protest in the West Bank as tensions continued to escalate near Palestinian cities. Let's take a closer look at what happened.
On Friday, a 26-year-old American and Turkish dual citizen, Ayşenur Ezgi Egi, was killed while participating in a protest against the IDF near the Palestinian city of Nablus. The IDF is investigating the incident, but thus far has stated that during operations near Beita, troops opened fire after an instigator had posed a threat to soldiers by throwing rocks. Palestinian reports claim that the IDF used stun grenades, tear gas, and live ammunition to disperse a protest against settlement expansion in the West Bank. Ayşenur lives in the United States and is reportedly an activist with the anti-Israel group, the International Solidarity Movement. In response to the incident, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated they deplore this tragic loss, and Turkey condemned what they called a, quote, murder committed by the Netanyahu government.
Dün gencecik bir evladımızı Ayşenur Ezgi Eygi'yi alçakça katlettiler. Bugüne kadar 17 bini çocuk, 41 masum sivili öldürdüler.
Last week, Turkish President Erdogan, known for his support of Hamas and extreme positions against Israel, also called for a new alliance of Muslim nations against Israel. The incident has also led to increased criticism of Israel from anti-Israel groups and activists involved in the protests against the IDF in the West Bank.
And this happens in context. This isn't an isolated incident. It happens in the context of the 17 people who were killed in demonstrations in Beita since 2021. We have heard nothing about them because they're not Americans.
The death of Ayşenur also comes after Palestinian media claimed that a 13-year-old was killed after being shot by IDF forces in the midst of a clash between extremist settlers and Palestinians in the village.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.